Well, hello from the Stade de France. It is after midnight here, around 12:30 a.m. local time, but not too late for us to dig into what we saw tonight. And well, France punished Ireland 36 points to 14. They scored 5 tries to Ireland's 2. Ruaidhri O'Connor and Cian Tracey are here. Are you ready for this, lads?
I feel like I'm on Graham Norton. Sitting on this big red couch.
We are in
very
the
somber, Sinead. I think this couch is at odds with the discussion we're about to have. This feels like a very upbeat couch.
Yeah.
I'm having a coffee at 12 at night. It's all good.
I know. In case
Six
people
Nations is up and running. Allez bleu.
It is a good red couch here sitting on there. Okay, well, before we get into it, a reminder that our rugby coverage in Indo Sport is sponsored by Energia, who sponsored the game at all levels in Ireland. To learn more about the rugby partnerships and exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, go to energia.ie/rugby. Okay, Rory, forget about the red couch for the moment. What is your top line from that game tonight?
Well, I don't think it's a shock, but it was still shocking to watch it. I maybe made a mistake of going into the YouTube comments during the week, and people were very kind of, oh God, these are awful negative. I think that someone called us 2 clowns of brodies being doom and gloom merchants, and we were just being realistic about Ireland's place in the world now. And Russ Petty, who I often quote because he's very good on the stats, Ireland's last 4 games against top 5 ranked opposition are losses by 17, 13, 11 and now 22 points. This is now a trend that's unfolded over the course of 2025. It's continued into 2026. It's in keeping with their defeat to France last year, with the defeat to South Africa. Maybe less so in the New Zealand game, which was a different type of game, but I'm not sure New Zealand are in that company either anymore. And it was a reality check for Irish rugby about where the national team is now, back in the stadium where 2.5 years ago they were able to go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the world and came oh so close to getting to a semi-final, and we think potentially coming back and playing in a final here, maybe against France. And if that had happened, they would have had more tickets than the French people, which felt very different to tonight when there was only about 5,000 Ireland fans over. It was a really sobering night. It was a deserved win for France, who were excellent. And there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I think Irish rugby has had reality checks over the last while since the World Cup. I just think this is the latest one. I think maybe you go back to the Six Nations game in Dublin against France last year. That was certainly a sobering reality check. Obviously losing to the All Blacks in Chicago weren't great. And then what South Africa did to Ireland in November was absolutely a reality check. As I was sitting there watching alongside you guys, obviously your mind kind of drifts back to 23 and the last time that Ireland were here, and the weekend that they were part of 2 of the best games in terms of the back-to-back quarterfinals that were here, and to see how far they've fallen since then is quite jarring. Now, I will caveat that with, and I seem to be the only one, just from talking to a few of our colleagues, and you certainly, Rod, briefly after the match, when it was 22-0 at halftime, and then France scored their 4th try after halftime, and it goes to 29-0. At that point, I'm wondering what the record score, a record defeat Ireland have suffered in Paris is. I was wondering where Ireland going to score a try.
I looked up when was the last time that France nilled Ireland at that stage.
Yeah, and I don't want this to sound like that I'm giving them a free pass, but I do think the way that they did, it was a heavy loss. Don't get me wrong. But I think it could have been so much worse. And the reasons it wasn't worse was because the fears that I had, and I presume most of our listeners and our watchers had coming into the game, was that the scrum could get dismantled. And it didn't. It absolutely held its own. And I think Jeremy Loughman deserves a lot of credit for that. The line-out was mostly good. They had a couple of ones when Ronan Kelleher came on at the end, which didn't go. But generally, the set piece was good. I thought the impact of the bench was impressive as well. I thought guys like Michael Milne, Nick Timoney, Jack Conan, James Ryan were all very good as well. And unfortunately, with the reality checks that we're talking about, I think there's going to have to be a bit of pain for Irish rugby to get anywhere near back to where they should be and they believe they should be. But I asked Andy Farrell in the post-match press conference just now, if he was confident that he could close the gap, and I was kind of wondering if he might bite back at this suggestion that there is a gap. But he didn't. He said he is confident, which of course he's going to say, but I thought it was a bit interesting that he essentially, without saying it, acknowledged that there is now a gap between Ireland and the best teams in the world. So that is a concern as well. But I did think in the midst of the doom and gloom that there were positives as well.
Yeah, it was the biggest margin of defeat in a Six Nations game for an Andy Farrell team. I think the standout quote, which I believe he gave to ITV, was that it was the lack of intent from Ireland in the first half. Like, that is an indictment of this team, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's whack-a-mole, because they fixed their line out, they fixed their scrum, and then a whole new set of issues come up. Their defence was terrible. Their aerial work, like their entire game plan was based around going after France in the air, and they didn't start winning contestables until the last half an hour after the bench had come on, and when they did that, like, they brought Jacob Stockdale off and brought Jack Crowley on and moved him to fullback, and then they realised they'd made a mistake and they took Tommy O'Brien off instead, and Jacob Stockdale come on and played as if he was a new player, a sub. It was a different Jacob Stockdale. Suddenly he started winning every ball, he got his hands on the ball. It was like Jacob Stockdale, the one that we've seen for Ulster. It was almost like coming off gave him the kick up the ass that didn't get. I'm not laying all the blame on Jacob Stockdale. There were far more established players in the team who I think now must come under huge scrutiny, like Gary Ringrose.
And that was one of the big talking points coming into this, wasn't it? That, like, the established players need to show what they could do.
And they're not doing it anymore. And I'm not saying you drop them forever, but I think their places need... Like, I think Josh van der Fleer needs to be under threat from Nick Timoney, who had a massive impact into the game.
Yeah.
I think the players who were playing well for their provinces, like one of whom is Joe McCarthy, who had a bad game tonight. So it's not a like, you know, 1 2 plus 2 equals 4 necessarily. But I think he needs to start back in form. He needs to refresh this team. It's overdue. It's like, you can't keep playing the hits, and maybe a spell out of the team will rejuvenate some of these players. But if, like, maybe training has been just like, these players haven't been doing it in training. But I do think,
if you're listening to them, training is great all the time.
Yeah,
but, like,
I mean,
if the coach is coming out saying that there's a lack of intent and aggression in the opening Six Nations game away from home in Paris, the question is, can he fix it? Or does he have the ideas to fix it?
Does that become a viable question now? Yeah.
Well, I think I'm not saying sack the coach. I think he's earned the right to turn it around himself, and he has turned around a difficult period before in his first couple of years. But he had Johnny Sexton as a player back then. He had Keith Earls. He had Peter O'Mahony. Maybe this was always going to be the pain that came along the way, and they can rebuild. But we're not seeing the evidence of it now, and all we're seeing is them slipping further and further away. And I think Italy be licking their lips coming to Dublin in a week's time. I think England will be absolutely relishing this Ireland team coming over in 2 weeks' time. I think Scotland will fancy their champions coming to Dublin. I think they're still good enough to beat Wales, but that's where Ireland are at now. They're scrapping for their lives. They're scrapping for their top half of the table finish at this point, and that's on the back of a poor defence, big players, Lions not playing well. We know they're good players. They're just not showing it anymore.
Yeah, I think it's telling the guys who were saying who did play well, your likes of your Jeremy Loughman at the scrum, Michael Milne, Nick Timoney. Like, we're not saying, Dan Sheehan, we're not saying Tyg Byrne, guys who really and truly, if an Irish team wants to win away from home in France, they have to deliver like 8, 9, 10 performances, and really none of them did. I thought Stuart McCloskey was probably the pick of the starters, a guy again who's really had to earn his way in on the back of his excellent club form with Ulster. But yeah, guys need to take, I think, a long hard look at themselves in the mirror. I think it's also worth remembering the length and the calibre of Ireland's injury list that they came here. And again, I'm not giving them an easy out, but like, you come away to France without your first three choice loose heads, without Tyg Furlong, without Hugo Keenan, Mac Hansen, these guys who are
how much of a difference do you think that would have made if they were starting?
I think it would have made a difference because they're top class players, but then again, the intent wasn't there across the board. And I think you're right, Rod, like, for a coach like Andy Farrell, everything we know about him is intent, it's desire. And I thought his body language, we spoke a bit about this in our video yesterday, wasn't it, that his tone at the team announcement press conference on Tuesday, it's not, of course it's not Saturday today, was just a little, it wasn't quite as kind of rousing, we're in the World Cup, this is the big boy stuff. It was more, I think, realistic, because I think he knew. Deep down he knew that to pull off what would have been a remarkable upset would have required so many things to go right for Ireland and things to go wrong for France. And like, when Ireland scored their second try and then they had the potential Ronan Kelleher try chalked off, like fairly so, whatever, that could have been 29-21, and the atmosphere was starting to slightly shift. I know France still had Ireland at arm's length, but really fine margins. And like we said it yesterday, if they'd come away with a losing bonus point, it would have been a miracle.
But they used to be a team, like when they came here in 2022 and ran France close, every time they were punched, they counter-punched. And today, so that the first entry to the 22 was an Ireland entry to 22, and Sam Prendergast didn't take the option to pass wide. Instead, he carried it himself, and then he gave it to Josh van der Fleer, who didn't look ready for the offload. Chance gone. When they didn't really get another chance until later in the half. There was a chip and chase, and Prendergast gives away a penalty on Ramos. A little bit harsh, but he probably got over eager. Like he probably could have waited.
Clever by Ramos.
But like you wait, you get your 5 meter, or you get your 22 meter drop, or your goal line drop out. You've got a selection of moves we've seen over the years. You maybe get a score there. You're back 22-7 potentially. They get back to a point where there's 2 points on offer if they just execute on those chances, and they get into position. They go through 17 phases on the line, and they just lose a couple of collisions. They start going backwards, and they panic a little bit, and they knock on. I know there was a couple of controversial decisions in around there. It was hard. We didn't have ref mics to quite get a sense of it. But if you score there, as you say, and like the Kelleher try was basically a French mistake, but it was on the back of a Doris knock on. Ireland, when they're good, nail those moments. Ireland, when they're good, come away from Paris with 2 points tonight against the odds, and we're all talking about, wow, that's not a bad result in the end of it. But in the end, it's France and Adesogbe scoring in the corner a 5th try. Ireland didn't used to concede 5 tries in any game, no matter where they went. Probably have to go back to maybe the first test in New Zealand for the last time Ireland conceded 5 tries, or maybe was it Dublin against France last year? I can't remember how many it was.
They conceded. Remember the intercept? So they got a late try in Dublin as well last year.
And that did, like, that late try. Look, on reflection,
you could see it coming
on balance, like it was probably a fair reflection of the game, but it did put a bit of gloss on the scoreline for them at the end. And look, I think we should have probably said at the very start, some of the rugby that France played, at times it was like they were playing a different sport. It's the pace that they do everything at, and like, they already, like, that's in their DNA, but to plug an out half like Matthew Jalibert into that team, I just thought some of his touches were absolutely magical. Like, I actually nearly thought he had more of an influence than Dupont on the game, which is not something you'd say. Dupont was excellent, don't get me wrong.
I thought the best player in the pitch was Michael Gaillard. I thought he was savage, absolutely sensational, and Ireland just don't have a player of that physical prowess. Now, Joe McCarthy is well able to mix it in games against those kind of players, and I think Edwin Udogbo, with a little bit of time, maybe Cormac Izachuku could come in and they can mix it a little bit athletically. And maybe there are players within the squad who, over maybe this Six Nations, now that they've just lost to France 5-0 on points, maybe the title might be gone. Maybe this is the window where he needs to go and find players who can bridge the gap. But it's going to be hard, because it might have some pain, and that's going to be a difficult period. But like, he needs to start finding some answers, because I got the sense from him down there, Andy Farrell, that he didn't have answers. And I don't know what he need. Like, I think we need to talk about 10, because I think Sam Prendergast had a really difficult night, and I think he's got a big decision to make again at 10. Does he stick with Prendergast? Potentially damage his confidence, potentially damage the team overall, because he's making bad decisions, he's making bad mistakes, teams are going after him. France made 20 tackles and missed 7 tonight. That's a busy night at the office. Made some scatterbrain decisions, threw an intercept, did some wonderful things during the aborted comeback. But overall, I didn't think he was good enough tonight, and I think that's a major question mark going into Italy next week.
What about that, Keane?
Yeah, how are we still having this conversation?
We're having it for the next couple of years, I think.
Yeah, look, he mixed the good with the downright awful.
Yeah, he had a nice kick that time to Tommy O'Brien.
And a good kick to the corner that led to, I think it was the second try. A nice little front door pass, and look, they're the positives, but yeah, some of the stuff was just mad. Like, I know he was trying to stop, I think, a 50-22 when he volleyed that ball clear, but I think you have to take your medicine there. To volley the ball clear like that just gives France the counter-attacking opportunity that they crave, and that's what ended up happening. I don't know, was he spooked or what? But when he threw the hospital pass to poor old Tommy O'Brien, I'd say Tommy O'Brien was cursing him. Just completely scrambled, and you can't afford for your 10 to not have the clarity in those kind of moments, because I think that spreads through the team in terms of those kind of negative effects, and it's not good. And I think we're having the same conversations over and over again, and I think Sam Prendergast was picked because Ireland felt like they would have to score tries. Obviously they have to score tries to win the game, but I think the fact that France and the amount of tries that they could have scored, and sure enough they scored 5, but what he's bringing on the positive side of the game, I don't think it's big enough to sacrifice the defensive issues that
you think it's seeping through the team then as well?
I think it has to, because you look down through the years at, like, the best Ireland hens, Ron O'Gara, Johnny Sexton, the confidence that they command, and like I would imagine that players around him feel 10 foot tall when they're on their game. Now, it's not all on Sam Prendergast, but he needs to nail his part of the game, particularly in defence, and he's not doing that. He tried and he did make a couple of good tackles, but I think of the Jalibert try off the scrum, he's just not good enough.
But it's not just the fact that he missed the tackle, and Jalibert ghosted past him if he wasn't there, and obviously O'Brien shot out. But I don't look, my read of it wasn't that it was more that it was Prendergast. It's the fact that he made that rash decision to kick the ball, and it was backed up by Jacob Stockdale being beaten in a postage box by Beal Beret. 5 or whatever minutes later, Prendergast gives the hospital pass to O'Brien, and then he doesn't nail his tackle off the scrum, and you're like, this is such an issue for Ireland, is that they make an error. Like McCarthy, just harebrained decision to kind of rush out and play. I think it was Dupont at the base of a ruck. That's 3 points, and you're 22-0 down. Like these harebrained decisions and these back, not being able to, like this was a team. You mentioned clarity. Like they used to take their deep breath and move on when they had a blow. Now they get frazzled, and look, the atmosphere was unbelievable out there, and it's not like any other away venue. Although Twickenham can be very loud, and they're going to be. We all know the English are coming into the Six Nations cock a hoop, and if they win their first 2 games, they're going to be absolutely licking their lips at hammering Ireland in a couple of weeks' time, and Ireland need to deal with that. But you can't, like, if you still think you're a team who can go win World Cups, you can't get frazzled. You gotta, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss a tackle. That's going to happen in a game, but you can't back it up with another mistake. I thought Andy Farrell should have gone to his bench much earlier. Yeah. I thought we saw the impact of the bench, and maybe if you bring them on early, you don't get that impact. But I thought first half there were players playing poorly who could have been whipped off, and I know what Rassie Erasmus would have done. I think he would have made some changes to his team early, and that would have been potentially a message to the team. It could have been potentially just a bit of energy. He left it to 50 minutes. He'll say, look, we put ourselves in the position to go and get 2 points from the game, but I thought it was conservative because I thought that was the kind of game where you need to make changes. I just don't think you have to wait until the 50th minute and your plan. Like, you need to change things up.
Yeah, like they were dominated in collisions, they were dominated on the ground at the breakdown, and they were dominated in the air.
In the air. Like, what about that area? Like, the return on those contestables was just
and
terrible.
I thought Andy Farrell hit the nail on the head when he said, you make your own luck. And I think we all know what he means in terms of, Jalibert's
that's coming into the intent
put,
as well.
Yeah, exactly. And Jalibert's little dink that he put over the top and the ball does bounce favourably. The little volley that Thomas Ramos did, like, I mean, what a player.
It was beautiful.
He is in a team full of superstars. He's just amazing. He doesn't always get the headlines, but he's just such a brilliant player. But Andy Farrell is right. Like, you do create your own luck, and like Ireland seem to like, I haven't seen them kick like contestables as much as this. It was clearly a defined game plan, and you would have thought with the back three in particular that they picked, that they would have had the height and they would have had the aerial prowess. I thought Tommy O'Brien had a really difficult night as well. He's been brilliant for Leinster over the last couple of years, and he's earned his opportunity on the right wing, but he had a really tough night. I thought Jamie Osborne had a couple of good moments, brilliant 50-22, but again, we didn't see it in the air. Jacob Stockdale, we were just down chatting to him in the mix on it. He's such a big lad, but I'd like to see him use more of his height and his size.
Just mention O'Brien again. You go back to when it was still a game, and that moment where Prendergast kicked that beautiful kick out wide to him, and he's one-on-one with Ramos, and he kicks it too early. But you pointed out there's a lovely seam of space in between Ramos and the covering defence, so he's a quick player. You could step off your right, cut inside and try and make that seam, or you can give yourself another 2 seconds, draw Ramos and then chip over, and he gets there because he was so close to getting there. And that's the level. Like, that's like, Beal Beret doesn't make that mistake. Beal Beret gets his timing right all the time. And like, I'm not saying O'Brien is still a very young player in terms of international. I know he's 27, but he's in terms of international experience. But you mentioned France's stars and you're railing them off. Like, Ireland, how many lines were in the team today? Like, none of them played
4
to their
on
best.
the bench alone.
Some of them played very well. I thought Jack Conan was outstanding.
He was,
to go back to the kicking, it was 39 kicks each. France kicked for 1,150 metres. Ireland kicked for 1,024. Very similar stats to Ireland and Australia when Ireland got loads of change. Remember Mac Hansen making big aerial plays. Like,
that's who Ireland needed tonight. Somebody like Mac Hansen.
Well, Mac Hansen would have made a big difference. I'm not sure he would have won the physical collisions in the middle, but I think he would have won some aerial battles. And Farrell did say it was defence, it was collisions. And when I asked him about Sam Prendergast later on, he did talk about it's very hard for a 10 to play off the back of a team that's losing collisions, which is fair enough. But like that kicking game, those stats, you'd expect to get a lot more change in a game where you kick that much, but because the chase was feeble, they weren't going to win in those 50-50s, whereas France did. France were getting up the pitch, they were making the gains, and that was the strategy. And maybe they didn't change strategy quickly enough. It was a horrible night out there, so maybe you had to kick, but again, are they agile enough within games to change tactics? Because when they started playing with a bit of ball in hand, they actually look like quite a good team.
Yeah, because the contest was pretty much over by the time that they started playing. That's the most disappointing thing, because we know all the cliches about, you know, when you're playing away from France to try and get on top and silence the home crowd, and they didn't quite silence them with the two tries. But when the TMO was checking that Ronan Kelleher potential try, it was feeling a little bit nervous. And I think, to go back to your point that Andy Farrell was saying about, you know, losing collisions, the back row were completely outplayed, the Irish back row. I thought Cian Prendergast, like, he did some good things well, but this was a different level for him tonight. And I think...
So did Farrell pick the wrong team?
I'm not sure the makeup of the back five of the pack worked tonight. We mentioned Joe McCarthy in terms of, you know, going up against Giard. He wasn't great either. That penalty that he gave away was to Joe McCarthy of old, and unfortunately that is still part of his game, because he plays the game on the edge, but that was just completely needless. Like, this is all ifs, buts and maybes. It sounds like I'm making excuses, but all week, and from being in Portugal last week, my sense was that they might have went with Tadhg Byrne at 6, and I thought James Ryan was excellent when he came on, really brought some serious physicality. But like, that's just the benefit of hindsight. I think Cian Prendergast had done well for Connacht and had earned his opportunity, but I think you saw the different levels that it went up. And by the way, I'm not blaming Cian Prendergast, because I thought Caelan Doris was outplayed by Anthony Gelange. I thought Josh van der Fleer was pretty anonymous, really. And like, again, you can't afford to have, like, I'm talking more about Van der Fleer and Doris in particular, you can't afford to have your best players not be at their best in Paris.
Well, like, Doris is one of your collision winners. Dan Sheehan at his best as a collision winner. Van der Fleer, his carry at his peak was outstanding. You know, Joe McCarthy's one of your collision winners. I thought France doubled up on him really well. They knew that Ireland were going to try and get him over the gain line, and I think he got frustrated once he found the going tough there. That's the level. That's a mark of respect to him, and he needs to understand that that's coming, and he needs to get better. I thought Prendergast struggled to have any influence on the game. I thought his line-out work was good, and that's one of the reasons he was there.
The line-out was good.
That's a fair point.
But,
the line-out,
but you know, I think Ryan Baird was missed. Unfortunately, now Ryan Baird goes to sleep at line-out sometimes, and that costs Ireland. So, and Prendergast doesn't do that. Did he pick the wrong team? Like, it's a bit after time, and it's not like I wrote 1,000 words on Thursday saying Andy Farrell's picked the wrong team, or on Tuesday. So I always feel a little bit smug at the end of it. But if Nick Timoney was training like that, well, then maybe there was a reason for picking him. You know, if Michael Milne, Paris Lockman did well, but he did not, like, there was a tip on from, I think, Tadhg Byrne to Lockman at a time when Ireland were getting a bit of momentum, and he knocked it on. And Milne is a better baller. Like, he's a better all-round player. Now, I think Lockman is a stronger scrummager, but again, I don't want to pick on the guys who come into the team necessarily, because I think the leaders need to take responsibility for this, because they're not playing well enough. Maybe that's the price they're paying for the Lions. There is always a bit of a tax on being a bulk supplier. I think the fact that the entire Ireland coaching ticket went on that Lions tour, paying a price for that, and maybe by the time the World Cup rolls around, it'll all come back together. But I think if David Humphries is looking strategically at this, I think maybe the 2020 with the next Lions tour, let's not sacrifice the entire of Irish rugby for it, because I think there's a big price being paid.
And you look at the summer tour, obviously, as well, that they went to Georgia and Portugal. Like, they're not exactly games that are going to prepare a lot of the younger guys for potentially playing in France in the opening night of the Six Nations. I think, look, you mentioned, I think it was you, Sinead, mentioned Edwin Adogbo, and I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen him on the bench, maybe as part of that kind of bench impact for 20 minutes. But the word is that, like, he just had too much to learn in such a short space, and he's never been in camp, so I can understand that. But to go back to kind of the balance and the makeup of the back row, I thought it was a real pity that Cormac Izuchuku came into this camp still kind of nursing that toe injury, because look, Ryan Baird has been mostly excellent since he's kind of come in and replaced Peter O'Mahony, but Izuchuku fits a similar athletic profile, and I think he's another guy to be reasoned to be potentially optimistic when you come to places like France. He has
to start picking some of these guys if we're going to be optimistic about them. He keeps picking the same players over and over again, and it's not working anymore. And I think, they almost need to kick up the backside as well of being left out of a big game, because James Lowe's had it. Let's see how James Lowe comes back, because unfortunately Stockdale didn't exactly take his chance. I know he's good in the last half an hour, but if Izuchuku is fit next week, get him in the team, get Timoney in the team, pick the lads who are top of the ground. If Bryn Ward was tearing it up and training and it goes well for Ireland Day on Saturday, on Friday night. Bring him into the squad. Let him tear up trees. Let him shake some trees and start smashing lads in training.
Isn't it?
Time is starting to tick, and
whatever, 20 months.
I think this championship is gone now. I don't see.
I wouldn't write it off just yet. I wouldn't write it off. Genuinely.
I don't think you're going to win it playing the same rugby with the same team. Like, if Edinburgh Dogboat needs to learn that much to catch up, maybe simplify your game plan. It didn't look like a very complicated game plan out there tonight. Like, all you have to do is chase some box kicks. Put them on for the last 15-20 minutes and smash things. Like, sometimes rugby's a simple game. Maybe I'm being silly, but I think, have they made it too complicated? Do they have the players who can interpret that game plan? Do they need to strip things down? Because at the moment, they're chasing this game plan that they used to be able to play when they had a world class out half. They don't have that anymore. They've got 3 players who all have deficiencies, 4 if you count Kieran Frawley. Does he stick or twist? Does he send them all back out, give them another chance next week against Italy and say, prove yourselves as Ireland internationals? Or does he go, hang on, I keep trying this over and over again, I need to blood some new players? I don't think he knows. And I think his strategy from time immemorial has been to back his big guys. Yeah. But that's not working.
If he doesn't know,
it didn't sound like he knew when he was downstairs. Like, he could have described the problems, but I don't think he came up with many solutions, certainly publicly.
Yeah, and Italy obviously next week. This isn't the Italy of old where you're just make loads of changes and it'll be grand and you'll win. Like, Ireland need to pick a team good enough to win. I'm thinking again, the profile of players. I'd like to see maybe Robert Balakoon get a chance. Watching him up close in training over in Portugal, just forgot how much of a specimen, how much of an athlete. Now, unfortunately, his body hasn't been able to play ball consistently enough, but you can see why Andy Farrell and the coaches are really keen to have him in camp. Maybe he's a guy who could add a little bit of something different in the back 3, but I wouldn't. It is obviously a really sobering night, I think was the word you put in, and I agree, but I wouldn't write off the campaign just yet. They've massive ground to make up, but I think they can make it. They can start next week by beating Italy, and I'm curious to see how good this England team are. I know they're on an 11-game winning run at the moment. They're playing very good rugby. The current laws really suit them. But who's to say Ireland couldn't go to Twickenham and turn them over? Well,
I don't think they'll have to be very good to beat this Ireland team based on what we're seeing at the moment. I think physically they have all the attributes of the teams who are beating Ireland up. Obviously, if Ireland find form, but we're looking at these ifs, buts, and maybes, and hoping hoping it all comes together. That was the whole thing this week. Was I could see a way that Ireland could win, but it was relying on 10 players who were out of form, plus 5 newcomers, who haven't been picked for a long time to all come together, get their scrum right, their line out right, which they did, get their defence right. Gary Ringrose is the defensive leader. He's had a poor season. And there's no obvious, is Tom Farrell the right man to come into the team? He's the next in line in the squad, but I don't think he's quite good enough at this level either. So there's a problem there that he doesn't trust his backups. And you're again looking at a 30-something-year-old to come in. So there are problems within the depth chart as well. So it's not like he kind of needs, we do have a small player base. He needs these players to start playing again. But it's a Lions year, it's post-Lions year. They've all got a hangover. It's a hangover on top of the World Cup hangover. That's not a good combination.
Yeah, just on Ringrose, he's turned into this sort of defensive outside centre, and it doesn't always go well like it didn't tonight, but he made a break in the second half and we both kind of turned to each other God, I haven't seen Gary Ringrose do that. And you need to have more from your centres. I know I mentioned Stuart McCloskey and I think he was excellent, but imagine having a 13 who's willing to go on the outside of a man. And I'm not saying Jude Postlewaite has a lot of ground to make up, Dan Kelly the same. I'm not saying there's necessarily a ready-made replacement, but Andy Farrell has to get more out of Gary Ringrose in attack. It was so jarring to see him make that break. You're
it was a reminder.
He still has it. He still has it in his game, and I know a lot of it is because of sorry, Roger, let you jump in then. But he is Leinster's defensive leader because he's the shooter in Jack Nienarber's blitz defence. But he has to bring more as an attacking threat. He has to.
I think Ireland's attack opened up massively when they brought Jack Crowley on a fullback and had that second playmaker pair of hands. Now, Farrell was kind of, pointed to the fact that Osborne's still a good player and he can play that creative role as well. And Osborne hasn't played for 4 months. That was always going to be a different
it's not his forte though.
No, Osborne's one of the players who could come into the midfield if they could find a different fullback. But I think that look that they had of having Crowley at fullback, I think it suits Crowley.
Yeah.
I think it simplifies the game for him. I thought Prendergast played better when he had the second set of hands, the second set of eyes. I thought Crowley made some really good defensive plays as a fullback as well. I'm not saying they're going to start him against Italy there, although if you play him there, you could maybe move Osborne into the midfield, and you can change things up that way. So there was glimpses in that second half. My issue with being as positive as Keane is that had France kind of switched off a little bit in the way that Ireland did. Ireland-France in 2006, this was like a mismatch of all the different nightmares that we've had in Paris over the years. In 2006, Ireland scored a flurry of tries. I just remember Andrew Trimble running the length of the pitch after France had basically gone home. Like, had France gone home, like, you know, did they leave the door open? And France have the capacity to do that. So can you read too much into it? I mean, if that was Ireland finding themselves and finding some form, and maybe he picks the bench to start against Italy, and he gets that from them, and he gets a big performance against Italy, well, then you retrieve something from it. I think it's just too small a sample size and too contingent on one team switching off and the other team having a hungry bench coming on. That's my worry.
And it's a completely legitimate concern, I suppose. Like, just to go back to the point I was making in regard to that, is that when France went 29-0 up, I genuinely thought that Ireland could concede 50 or 60, and they didn't. So I guess that's where my positivity, or if that's what you want to call it, comes from.
South Africa. Like, you know, South Africa, I know they went scrum after scrum after scrum, but like Farrell, the reason Farrell was proud of that performance was because Ireland hung in that game defensively and made loads of scramble tackles, and like, you know, I don't like throwing the word heroic out, but they were down to 12 men at one stage, weren't they? And they were kind of hanging on in there. But it's just like, that's not what Ireland were. Like, you know, Andy Farrell's Ireland, we know what the level they can get to. And the fear is that they're just not going to get back to that level, because there's no guarantees in rugby. Like, we've seen that with lots of teams. Yeah,
because this might be just the level they're at for now. You know, like I said, they're kind of in between cycles. I know, like, the World Cup is next year and it's going to come around very quickly. But, like, you would never, ever write off a Six Nations campaign, and that's not what I'm saying now. But because I think expectations are not quite... I don't think anyone went into the Six Nations thinking Ireland are going to win it, or Ireland going to win a Grand Slam. And while, you know, the prize money and all that is really important in terms of where they finish, but if it meant blooding more players like your Edwin Adogbo off the bench against Italy, whatever it is, Cormac Izuchuku starting, and then those guys are going to the World Cup next year, that would be no bad thing either. But it's the road to get there. You just can't afford to take, you know, too many the manner of the beatings like they did tonight.
Andy Farrell said an interesting thing on the top table. He said some of these players have never been through this in a green jersey. You know, Caelan Doris was there at the start when things were difficult, but he was often injured in those first two campaigns. His Ireland experience, Dan Sheehan's Ireland experience from 2022 through to 2024 was pretty much all positive. It was nights in the Stade de France with Zombie, and I know the World Cup quarter-final was a disappointment, but it was a glorious failure. Like, they came so close, they could have their head held high. They've had a couple of like really horrible days, kind of akin to the days they've had with Leinster in big games. And even I remember Sheehan saying that in the final moments when Hugo Keenan scored a try in Melbourne, he turned to Tyke Furlong and said, geez, we got on the right end of one of these. That's right. If you keep experiencing this in a green jersey, and your leadership core is like, you know, when Peter O'Mahony was there, he'd been through 2013, he'd been through 2019. You know, Sexton had been through that. Earls, they were conditioned. They knew how to get out of it, or they had been through it before. They know it's cyclical. Whereas the leaders in this team now haven't had this experience in green jerseys, and that's a challenge for Andy Farrell. They're not the biggest voices either. You know, they're not big. They're not big characters. Like, Doris is a very calm. Like, I thought he was really impressive. I thought he was actually quite impressive today in how he answered his questions, the few that he got at the top table.
When you could understand the French question.
Yeah, I think the French weren't happy with James Ryan's late hit on Jalabert. That was my kind of takeaway with that one. They got a bit annoyed about that. But, like, I just don't know if they're conditioned for this yet, and it's going to be an experience for them, and one they need to think their way through.
You mentioned the Lions there, and again, like, I don't want to be giving them excuses or a free pass, but I always go back to something that Luke Fitzgerald said on the Left Wing podcast at some stage a few months ago, and like, he's someone who's been there and done that in terms of the season after a Lions tour and how difficult that is, because I think that's an easy line for one of us to throw out when we don't really know what it actually feels like. But Luke Fitzgerald was quite strong on that, and how difficult it is post a Lions tour. That was back when however many Ireland players had on that tour. It wasn't the bulk suppliers of the team, and even the coaches in terms of like mentally and trying to refresh them. So I think that's a big factor in this season as well, you know.
But within those seasons you can find, like 2010, I think, if I remember correctly, Ireland finished with a big performance against England at Croke Park, and they found new life, and they built toward a really good World Cup in 2011. At the end of that Six Nations, Farrell did it in 2021. It wasn't Lions year, but a difficult Six Nations where they lost the first couple of games, but they found their way through it. Like, you have to turn these experiences into positive. You have, like, at some stage, there's got to be a rock bottom. There's no guarantee of it, but you've got to make sure that this is a line in the sand. We thought South Africa might be lying in the sand. You know, they went to Portugal. They told us they had a great they had a great camp. They were feeling good about life, and then they come out with no intent, to quote the coach. Like, that's really, really, really worrying. And if the Lions are struggling for form, motivation, energy, well, then don't pick the Lions. Put the Lions on the bench. That's what England are doing. You know, like, shake it up, do something different, because it's not working right now, and it hasn't really been working. I know they got picked off a record win against Australia 3 games ago. They beat England. You know, there have been glimmers, but, you know, Leinster's season's been poor, Munster's season's been poor. Like, Ulster are going well, but they're not playing Champions Cup rugby, so it's hard to trust their form.
Three teams in the Challenge Cup now, which again, it's more to where Irish rugby is at right now.
And that's the reality check that's there. And like Farrell, it's a far more difficult job than it was 4 years ago. He's been a great coach for Ireland. He's got a lot of thinking to do about how he gets his team back to the level that we saw, where they're able to go and take on this French team and the other teams, because France are not the best team in the world. South Africa are. England think they are. You know, this is like, you know, it's going to be a really challenging couple of weeks, because there's blood in the water, and that's up to Ireland. You know, Ireland needs to deal with that.
Yeah, it's the biggest challenge, I would say, of his coaching career, bar none, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of trying to, you know, rejuvenate this Ireland team, I think he's fully aware that the last time Ireland were here, as we said at the start of the chat, was a golden generation and passed up their opportunity to potentially win a World Cup. I mean, I know South Africa went on and did it, but who knows if Ireland had gotten over the line. But it feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? I know it was only back in 23, but it feels like a long time ago. Ireland just aren't at the top table anymore, and that's the reality, unfortunately.
Anything else before you leave? I know you want to stay on that red couch, guys, but we've got to leave it at some stage.
Say a few of the listeners would like to do that to you, all right?
So, no more Thursday nights, please. They're crap.
As good, but the atmosphere was incredible.
Yeah, but it would have been good on a Saturday or Friday night.
Anytime,
I think it's like the number of Irish fans who travelled was way down. There was no atmosphere in the city. Stade de France is a great venue. I'm not looking forward to trying to get back into the city from it tonight. Kind of regret not booking a hotel nearby. It's just not right. I just don't think. I really hope that it's a one-off, and even if the TV viewing figures are good, the Six Nations is built so much on travelling fans and the mingling of fans and the weekend element. I know there's going to be more Friday night games. I can live with that. Thursdays, no. It's not right. And the event worked. It's a great place to come and watch a rugby match, but it's not. I think you have to give the travelling fans more. They shouldn't have to take off a few days' work to come.
And it's not just the travelling fans. If we had any French listeners or viewers, like, rugby isn't just based in Paris. Like, look at the south of France in terms of, like, the amount of big rugby clubs. It's a pain in the ass for non-Parisian French fans to get here as well. So I couldn't agree more. But the spectacle before the game, they just know
the light show
they just know how to put on a show, don't they?
It was incredible.
And the crowd are in so early as well. I think it was 5,000 Irish fans, we believe, that were here, which is a really good effort on a Thursday night, to think of all the days you'd have to take off, but
split up, putting every different corner,
which is maybe something that, you know, Irish rugby could learn as well, rather than putting all the away fans together in the Viva. But it was a spectacular pre-game show, and like, any time you get to come here, I know it's obviously a disappointing night from Ireland, but it's a real treat to watch rugby here,
it is.
Well, especially when, like, their team, and we haven't given them as much. You, in fairness, gave them credit, but
they
like,
have
we focused
notice
on Ireland. But like, that is a phenomenal team full of phenomenal players who entertained us to the max. They didn't care that it was wet. You know, they didn't care that it was wet weather rugby. They just went and played, and they played with such a intent, to use Andy Farrell's word, such skill, physicality, speed.
The variety.
They look like the complete rugby team. And they're going to take some stopping. I know Steve Borthwick's already telling England fans to book their flights for the last game of the season. That could be a great game.
Could be a cracker.
Ireland could also upset England, lads. You heard it here first. Heard it here first.
Lads, we need to get a taxi out of Saint Denis. Rory and Keane, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for that. As ever, tonight's episode was sponsored by Energia. And for more reaction, you will get from Joe Malloy on the Indo Sport podcast on Friday.